What they have done in the last 71 years are crimes, not ordinary crimes, but crime against humanity. So we want to legislate that the CCP is a criminal organization, and their 90 million members are basically criminals or gangsters, and they should all be sanctioned.
How can the US effectively hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for its abuses, from the coronavirus cover-up to its encroachments on Hong Kong? Why is the Chinese leadership choosing to impose the national security law in Hong Kong, even though it will likely hurt China's economy badly? And, through the eyes of a Hong Kong businessman, how is the Chinese regime actually waging war on the US and the free world? In this episode, we sit down with Elmer Yuen, CEO of Golden Bridge Technology Inc., who is in the US advocating for freedom in Hong Kong. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Elmer Yuen, so great to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So Elmer, you are here in America to advocate for Hong Kong. I've just been learning about your amazing life history. I mean, you have such an interesting vantage point. You've lived, most of your years in Hong Kong, but a substantial number of years in China, in the mainland, and also in the US.
Yes.
Right? And you've done business extensively in all these places. So you have a very, very interesting vantage point. I want to make sure we take full advantage of that. So tell me, how are you seeing this situation in Hong Kong right now that everyone's talking about?
It's terrible. It's like a tsunami coming in a matter of days, which we're talking about. Everybody's aiming at July 1st. And when that tsunami comes, all the freedom, all kinds of freedom, religion, speech, everything will be gone, because the Chinese want Hong Kong to be similar to the cities in China. And as you know, it's a totalitarian regime, and they want to control everything.
And of course, you're talking about this pending national security law that details
exactly
forthcoming.
Exactly. And U.S. is trying to help. I think there was a meeting in Hawaii that Secretary Pompeo tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. And then they are moving forward anyway. So I think U.S. is ready to do something, and you can see from the Congress some resolution or law being passed quite urgently in order to meet the deadline. And they're still trying to tell the Chinese to stop, but it's not going to happen.
Well, it's an interesting day to be doing this interview, because there were actually two significant, there was a resolution and a bill. Mm-hmm. That was the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and this resolution that was put forth kind of supporting the joint Sino joint declaration,
yes,
British joint declaration. And so there is some kind of, and I think the Autonomy Act passed unanimously. So
yes, and that's very significant, because that act, that they will punish, mandatory punishment of individuals and businessmen and company that support this National Security Act, because in essence, they are violating the law last year. Last year they passed this Human Rights and Freedom or something like that.
Right, Human Rights, Freedom and Democracy Act.
And
right.
Which in essence, meaning not only they are going to sanction the government officials, but also those individuals. And in Hong Kong, as you know, very rich people, very rich and powerful people, and very big companies, including the banks, such as Bank of China, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, Charter Bank, all in support. I mean, honestly, they are under duress from the CCP.
There's a lot of debate about, or questions in people's minds, why, if the Chinese Communist Party in the mainland knows that passing this national security law will cause them big financial trouble potentially, right? I think, some large chunk of foreign direct investment goes in through Hong Kong into China. Why are they still doing it? I mean,
A tyrannical regime is different from a free world. Free world, the interest of the people counts. In a totalitarian regime, only the leader, one single leader, his face, all right, his reputation counts. Everything else is secondary. So he was very upset last year. You were in Hong Kong with this demonstration and riots. And Trump has warned him not to send in the People's Liberation Army. So he didn't. So Hong Kong was still in turmoil up to now. After the pandemic, Hong Kong is okay now with the pandemic. So he needs to do something draconian to show his fellow people he can control Hong Kong. So that's all. And he is risking the entire economy of Hong Kong. Hong Kong supplies 70% of the foreign currency to China. And he is also risking the entire China being sanctioned, like Russia or like Iran. It's a huge price, but they don't care. As long as he's supported by his own people with this communism, all right, that he is strong enough to fight the rest of the world, he will remain in power. That's what he's playing right now, to remain in power. People's welfare or business, economy of the country don't count.
It's interesting. One of the things I followed some of, you kind of became this overnight internet social media sensation, right? Kind of appeared out of nowhere, tons and tons of interest, because you were presumably speaking in a way that a lot of Hong Kongers especially are very, very interested in hearing. How did that happen?
No, it's not by design, truly by accident. Mm-hmm. I was going to come here earlier because I thought I can help Hong Kong by doing some so-called lobbying, right? And then I stopped off in Hong Kong to see my kids before I come. So they have this 14-day quarantine. And in Hong Kong, it's serious quarantine. They put you in a hotel, give you a room key that only works once. And in 14 days, it's solitary confinement. Nobody can visit you, right? And you're all by yourself. So by the end of the 10th day, I'm so bored. So my daughter did a couple of YouTube and asked me, what do you think about this national security law? I give her my honest opinion. Maybe I was also frustrated with this quarantine. So I spoke in pretty strong wordings. So suddenly, those YouTube became viral in Hong Kong. It's in Cantonese. And the Hong Kong people, they were desperate because this law is coming, and they say they want this law to be passed before 1st of July. So it's very, very severe. They can send their police, they can send their prosecutors, they can send their judge. So Hong Kong will lose all its autonomy, right, which was promised by the Sino-British Joint Declaration.
Right.
So anyway, my 2 or 3 YouTube became so popular. Then after I came out of the quarantine, my daughter said, why don't you stay a little longer and build up your viewers? So I stayed and made another 25 to 30 videos. And that's why your Epic Time Hong Kong came to me, also did about 5 or 6. Then I became more and more, I really give more thoughts about this situation. So I've decided, in order to speak without any hesitation, I use WeChat. When in China, they only use WeChat. To all my business associates to count me out, because I do not want to contribute anymore to this regime. And China, all business finally belong to the state. Right? There is no such thing as individual.
Right. They get the final word.
They get the final word, and they get the final benefit. So anyway, I WeChat everybody that I'm out of it, all right, and find somebody else. So I won't cause trouble for them.
Right.
And also, they can go and do their own business, and I'm out. So I don't have to worry about anything, about what not to speak, and worry about my friend and their safety and so on. So after I've done that, I spoke very, very openly. And this, I don't even make a draft or anything. So I spoke basically from my heart. And they like it. Suddenly I became a KOL, one of the most popular KOL. All I did is spoke my mind. And then I start getting more organized. I said, these kids are really suffering. You were in Hong Kong last year.
Yes.
The police were beating up the kids. You know, there was murder, raping, disappearance, everything, torturing, you know. And they don't publish, of course, the Hong Kong newspaper. You know, in Hong Kong, the only independent papers are the Epoch Times and the Apple Daily. The rest of all the media, the newspaper and TV, everything has been acquired by the communists. So they don't speak the truth anymore. And of course, you know, after the passing of this bill, this national security bill, I don't think Epoch Times or Apple can survive.
Really? So
basically, they would be treason. You know, they would be put in prison. All those people would be, you know, like the owner of Apple Daily, is it
Jimmy Lai?
Jimmy Lai. They will all be arrested, including myself if I return. And you know.
So you think that, you know, July 1st hits, the details of the law are presented, and everything changes just like that?
Yes, yes. Because in fact, they also talk about being able to go back, all right, from your cell phones to see all the record, see if you have any. You know, what I'm telling you now is already a crime under that law. Yeah, because splitting the country. If you say talking about autonomy, already you're splitting the country. Never mind independence, just autonomy for Hong Kong, which was promised, right? They signed off on the Joint Declaration. That's already a crime, a national treason. Very serious.
So, you know, you've come here with some very specific goals. You know, we discussed some of this. One of them, I mean, you've been also this kind of strong advocate for this Hong Kong students, which have, you know, take the protesters and so forth. So what is it that you are hoping the U.S. can do?
Yeah, you know, I even though I don't go into the violent part of these demonstrations, but I attend every one of them in the last 20 years or even more. So since the June 4th, I attend all the street protests or demonstrations. And but I also watch how these kids got beaten up by the police. And police have all the weapons. And the kids only have an umbrella. Remember, last year you were there.
Right.
So these kids really suffer, and about 10,000 of them, over 10,000 of them were arrested up to now, and tortured, right, raped, and some even murdered. We know quite a few of them never came back. And those people try to help, those students try to help from China. They were shipped back to China without any Hong Kong record. And we heard they were in some kind of camps. And they even, their parents got into trouble, you know, in China. In order to prevent more kids from coming in, they punish the parents so that the parents will hold their kids in China. Lots of Chinese mainland kids are trying to help. I mean, they are a human being too.
Very difficult to get the kind of evidence to show this stuff.
You know, the crime the communists have committed over the last 71 years, they all crime against humanity, nothing less than that. And very few of them you really have evidence. It's like against the Falun Gong, these what you call organ trading. They were selling their organs live, and hard to find evidence because when they were doing it, you can't video them.
Right.
So
you have to gather all the evidence sort of by looking at the data, by noticing the wait times, by putting it all together over more than a decade. You're right.
And the victims are mostly dead.
Right.
How do you find them? They are very good in destroying evidence. Like this pandemic, this Wuhan, they cleaned up all the evidence in Wuhan. That's why today, even if you WHO or whoever sent anybody in, there's no evidence. This is at the crime scene. They have no evidence. They cleaned it up. So they can keep arguing with you. Oh, yeah, it came from US, the virus. That's what they're saying. 90% of the people in China will brainwash that the virus came from USA.
So that's,
Can you imagine?
Well, that's really interesting. So we heard certainly some of these spokespeople sort of suggesting this sort of thing, but then they kind of backed down, I think, after some harsh words from the Secretary Pompeo and so forth. But you're saying that in China right now, because of this incessant propaganda, a large number of people believe it came from the US right now?
Over 90%.
How can you say that? How do you know this?
I talk to them. I tell them what the reality is. They say, no, it came from US. And then I said, you guys have to apologize and worry about reparations, right? From all over the world. It's not only a matter of US. They said, how come? Oh, we don't owe them anything. And they start making, they say, oh, AIDS come from US too, right? And they should pay us. That's their argument. They were all taught, brainwashed, to and they firmly believe it because, nobody wants to pay reparation. It's big money. I mean, the money is trillions of dollars, maybe over $10 trillion, the global loss this time.
Right. Why do you, maybe in a quick nutshell, why do you think China or Chinese Communist Party is responsible for the pandemic? In a nutshell.
First of all, the most advanced lab for virus is in Wuhan, this P4 lab that is designed by the French. And it started in Wuhan. In fact, from our record, they started having it in November. I think that's verifiable. And they didn't announce to the US until January. And before Chinese New Year, which is like 22nd of January, they let go of 5 million people because Wuhan is an industrial city and those guys have to go home. Workers have to go home. So this 5 million people went back all over China. And even after the Chinese New Year, which is January 22nd, they let go another few 100,000 people overseas, right? Flying overseas. It's a huge damage, to the world, and they were aware of it. They were fully aware of it from as early as December, and that's why they were covering up. There's no question. They were covering up. They destroyed all evidence and refused any U.S. expert visiting the site, and then you can come to your own conclusion. Why they do it, I don't know. I mean, there's no. The prima facie, you know what I mean.
Right.
So it's very, very serious. And the communist mentality, I don't want to accuse anything, but you have to understand the communist mentality. Communists think they are at war all the time. We live in the peace world. Seriously. We thought the war is over, right, after World War II. They live from the Communist Chinese from their very start, 100 years ago, they always believed they are fighting a war. If you read Marxism, their enemy is the free world, the free capitalist world. They want to keep on coming at you, sometimes low profile, sometimes high profile. So for them to develop bioweapons, this is their policy, even though they sign all kind of, what they sign don't mean anything. So right now, since the pandemic, there are more P3 and P4 labs being built. The government is funding more because this is the most effective and the cheapest weapon they can develop and cheapest to deliver. One little test tube can destroy a city.
Well, and it's incredible because, let's say that even if this virus did actually come from the market, which, or escaped from a lab or whatever really happened, it's very difficult for us to know at this point. We can certainly see the effect of a virus like this hitting the world.
This, I mean, in the free world, where we rule of law is very important, and everybody talk about evidence. I understand. I live here 20 years, but the reality is sometimes you cannot rely on evidence. Look at the Holocaust. By the time you receive evidence, all the Jews are dead. Sometimes you cannot work that way. In war, this is a war they are waging against the free world. In the war, by the time you really have evidence, 90% of the time, the war is lost and people died. It's exactly what's happening now.
Well,
you have to use another mentality. You have to use a very protective mentality to when you deal with such things. You cannot deal with them like any other country. This is a warrior country. The same as the Nazis. Nobody thought, the Nazi can be so bad. But then after the war, you discover what they've done. That's the problem with the tyranny or what do you call totalitarian, because people cannot challenge them. In our world, people are the master. They will not allow such thing to happen. But in a totalitarian, the leader can make any decision. Nobody can criticize him. He can kill any opposition. So he make big mistakes and nobody to pull him back. It happens in history time after time. Look at Japan, the Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, Stalin, how many people got killed under Stalin. It happens again and again. Unfortunately, I think dealing with a totalitarian, you have to have a different set of rules.
Well, so it is interesting that over the last some years, and especially with this whole coronavirus situation, it seems to me like kind of if there were blinders on a lot of people's eyes, I'm talking about people in general, suddenly, there's more vision here about the kind of things you're talking about, the kind of realities we've been reporting on at Epoch Times for 20 years. You mentioned, we were talking about these students and this is one of the big reasons you're here is to advocate for the students. Yes. How can Americans help the Hong Kong students? What is in your mind?
In fact, all Trump has to do is order the university to accept them, and then order the State Department to give them a visa to come in. That's all he has to do, and treat them the same as any American kids. Very simple. It's not really that difficult because there are a lot of mainland Chinese students leaving now from the States because some of them are really stealing technology, and so they are leaving, and so the Hong Kong student can replenish 10,000. There are 360,000 mainland Chinese students a year, so 10,000 from Hong Kong is nothing.
So you're basically advocating for the ones that have been charged.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I see. Exactly. Interesting.
And they sacrifice their life and freedom for Hong Kong, for the freedom of Hong Kong. I think they deserve to receive a good education. And some of the congressmen I met, they say these young kids are almost like the founding fathers of the United States. It sounds like a funny, but this is how a free country is formed, by these people with ideals.
But it's sort of, you're suggesting though that they have to leave in order to, so how does that work?
I mean, you saw them, they are very young kids, high school or just maybe university, early university. Now we have grade school kids getting arrested.
Yeah, I saw some reports on that.
Yeah, it's real. So all these kids are growing up, we need to give them a good education. At least we can do.
So the kids are one of your...
That's my first
absolutely.
First mission. And my second mission is the Joint Declaration. As you know, today's resolution was really condemning the Chinese for breaking the Joint Declaration. And they have violated almost everything. The communists don't understand law. They still live in the Middle Ages, where people have power, can order guilty or not guilty, violating, and change law all the time. This is still mainland China. So they don't understand. They have to play by, when they sign an agreement, they have to live by the agreement. So after a few years, they notice that nobody is watching, they start violating. It's exactly the same as the WTO. They promise everything they violated. The Joint Declaration, and in the end they say, oh, that was history. That was history. They say the Joint Declaration was history. That was an international agreement registered with the UN. But anyway, this is their mentality. So I want the sovereignty of Hong Kong should be reverted back to the British. And they are not interested to run Hong Kong. So they should, in turn, give it back to the residents of Hong Kong before 1997, right? And they should have a referendum, an independent public referendum, to choose their own future. Because it's okay if they choose to belong to mainland. It's okay, but you have to choose your own fate. That's the number 2 point I'm proposing.
Who would give Hong Kong back to the British? I'm not seeing the Chinese Communist Party doing that.
Absolutely no voluntary.
Yeah.
I believe, this is what I believe. I believe very shortly, within a matter of months, there will be conflicts. Either in the financial area, very severe, the American is going to punish them very severely, or even may end up with a kinetic war in the Taiwan area or in the South China Sea. And China is no match for US, either in the financial area, right, currency area, or in the kinetic war. They will be defeated, and they will surrender, and they will sue for peace. And then there will be negotiation. I believe it's coming. If you notice, it's coming. I noticed that President Trump went to Camp Davis for many weekends with the chief of staff and all these generals. He's preparing, maybe not to attack, but in case the Chinese, when they are in desperate trouble, they may do something. And I think U.S. is ready for anything that the Chinese start. So I feel that, and also, if you heard about 10 days ago, Secretary Mnuchin was talking about cutting off the money going in and out of Hong Kong, meaning US dollar, of course. Yes. The minute you cut that off, that whole economy will collapse. If he cut off Hong Kong, Hong Kong will collapse. If he cuts off China, China will collapse, like Iran. And they may sue for peace. And if they do, we want Hong Kong to have self-autonomy or self-decision to determine our own future. That's what I'm saying.
Do you think, of course, you're Hong Konger.
Yes.
Do you think you're ready to see, some kind of, severe financial punishment like you're describing here? Again, I know enough to know that it would be devastating.
Yeah. Last year, the young kids saying that we are willing to sacrifice to pay for the freedom. You can't get freedom and the rule of law or democracy for free. The British were giving to us almost for free, right? Because they had a good system back home. So we were enjoying freedom and the rule of law. We don't have any democracy yet. But when the British handed us back to the Chinese promised at least the same as the British. But now they are taking away everything. They are taking away. So the kids understand that. They want to fight for their freedom and democracy. That's why I'm so supportive. You have to pay the price. And what you're talking about is the price that the whole Hong Kong stock market may collapse, the Hong Kong dollar will collapse, the property will collapse. It's already collapsing now. And that's the price to pay if you want freedom and democracy. And I'm all for it.
There's a lot of Americans who are deeply invested, both in mainland and in through and even through indices. We're talking millions of Americans that have been through in various investment funds, through things like CalPERS and so forth.
Total about $4 trillion, right? Either in the stock exchange here, on the Chinese companies listed here, Hong Kong, loans, and then mainland China. That money, somehow, if we give them enough warning, they may be able to come back. And they are doing it at their own risk. I think President Trump have warned them repeatedly to come back, and they still keep going. The Wall Street, they are so greedy, so greedy. And not with their own money. The money belongs to the funds, retirement funds, insurance money. It's not their own money they are risking. It's terrible, the Wall Street.
Maybe they don't understand yet what the reality that you're portraying.
When they are playing with somebody else's money, they don't mind the risk, right? They know perfectly well. They know all about the trouble in China, much better than the rest of the U.S. Because, they have to do due diligence on every single company inside China.
Well, we also know that the rules are different,
Oh,
for
I
the
mean, how
Chinese
could
companies.
it be? How can the Chinese company going public here enjoy a less severe rule than the American company? It's a joke. And I don't want to accuse the SEC. We know that there's a hearing going on, and
Yes.
a lot of question on the behavior of SEC. Very questionable.
So we sometime in the near future we will have some answers to how this is going to go, but I think there is still a lot of question even in Americans' minds. Looking at the media, how the U.S. will respond when ultimately this law passes. But you're betting that the U.S. will respond strongly.
Yes, I think last year, U.S. didn't respond. Only told the Chinese, no, don't send the PLA into Hong Kong. That's all Trump said, because he wanted to get the trade deal done, which is understandable, right? He's trying to make money for U.S. But then we have the pandemic. Everything changed. All the dynamics changed, and they believe you may not have solid evidence, but everybody believes where the virus came from, who caused this big trouble, right? The
Right.
delay and the hiding, and allowing the people to travel here.
Yeah.
That is not disputable.
Right.
Right? So people want to see that their government, the administration, doing something. If you do nothing, you see the poll is going down, right? That poll is not going to go up just by tweeting. They want to see action. People here, I have many American friends. I've been here for 20 years. Mm-hmm. They want to see action. What the government, that's why all the congressmen, everyone I talk to, they want to start some kind of legislation against the CCP or China. And they too are under pressure from the voters that you need to do something.
Right. Well, and so this comes actually to this third point, which I think is very interesting to me in particular, because one of the things that I find quite important is to distinguish the Chinese Communist Party from China and from the Chinese people, because in the end, it is actually a political party. It's not the government, curiously, right? But you have some. I mean, we had some great conversations about this. Tell me what you see as a good solution to deal with the Chinese Communist
This is
Party.
my third reason for being here.
Yeah.
And Congressman Scott Perry used a good word. Sean and I was using a outlawing the CCP Act. We are trying to legislate, calling it an outlaw CCP Act, right? But Congressman Scott Perry said, criminalizing the CCP Act. What they have done in the last 71 years are crimes, not ordinary crimes, but crime against humanity. And thousands of books were written on it. Some with evidence, some without evidence. As you know, they're so good in destroying evidence. So we want to legislate that the CCP is a criminal organization. And their 90 million members are basically criminals or gangsters. And they should all be sanctioned. So this is the thing I'm trying to push through the Congress. And today we have very good news. Congressman Scott Perry and Mr. Congressman Yoho, sorry, I'm not very good with his name. So they are very supportive. And I believe within a few months, we may have a law, at least in the pipeline. You know, passing takes time, who knows.
Sure.
But at least you have a law. And then the communist knows that there's a law going through. And the members, the 90 million member will start thinking, should I belong to this organization?
Criminal organization.
I become a criminal, and I'm under the Magnitsky
Act.
Sorry,
That's right.
I'm
No,
not good with
absolutely.
Russian. Everyone will be under Magnitsky Act. So sometimes they will be resigning from the party, or new ones will not join. Their parents, once you join, this law will have long arms. You know, all the PRISM countries, all the European NATO countries, and Japan and Korea, everybody will go along with U.S. Then those people will lose their freedom. They know their kids can never come out. Their asset outside China will be frozen. Their company, and then if China sends somebody to sign a contract, most of them are party members, right? So nobody, oh, sorry, even people like us, I don't want to sign with you because I have secondary sanction against me. No bank accounts, no credit cards, no visas. That's what I want to hurt them, right? And they are genuinely a criminal enterprises or organization. This is the legislation route. And I'm working on also the judiciary route. We are going to court, either privately or find some federal prosecutors to sue the CCP in court, in the federal court, naming them, under the RICO Act, under the RICO Act, renaming them as a criminal organization. Once the judge rules, then the 90 million members, party members, will be criminals. Same thing. And the judge can say you're under certain sanction and so on. By law. I'm not even going through the administration because, as you know, the administration, there's somebody inside. It may, it's not really so much against the CCP. Some of them are for CCP. You know what I mean.
You know, this kind of legislation or this kind of, judicial action would be that would be a seismic shift.
Yes.
Because, effectively, right, it's interesting, the Chinese Communist Party sits on top of the government of China. It isn't the government yet. It has its, tentacles, I think is one of the words that some people use. I think it's apt everywhere. Is this even possible?
Because it will all happen in the States. I don't want to go to this international court and so on, because the Chinese have infiltrated everything. WHO, Human Rights Organization, WTO, and the Interpol, and then the Catholic Church, the Vatican. They've infiltrated the Vatican, believe it or not, right? They've infiltrated everything. And in US, they've infiltrated the Wall Street, most of the Ivy League schools, Hollywood, corporatists, you name it. All right? So going through the judiciary and the legislation would be not so complicated, relatively simpler. So I believe, I have made good progress today. and I feel quite confident.
You know, I think, do you not fear for your life in all this?
Of course I do. But then, I'm 71 years old. I had a good life. And I want to make a meaningful life, right? I mean, material-wise, I was never short. I was make good money and enjoy a good life. But then, when it comes to this point, they are forcing me in a way. But also I feel I'm doing something of meaningful. It will be my legacy if I succeed. Even if I don't succeed, it will be my legacy for my children.
So yeah, and actually, your daughter is actually quite involved in, Hong Kong democracy efforts, actually.
My second daughter was very active. She was the chairman was the former chairman for People's Power, which was very active during the Occupy Central and also the last year's extradition law demonstration. And now she's as the chairman of a public company. She formed herself, doing very well. And so she's supporting me, and I'm in the front line. So, but that's we have to do something, the right thing.
So you call this a war, and we've had guests on the show who have described it this way, more like a Cold War, obviously not a kinetic war, but what do you mean when you say this is a war?
The Chinese have been in war for 3,000 years. They are very experienced. They're very experienced with deceit. They consider deceit as an art to win a war, right? So they use unconventional warfare, because conventional warfare, they know they cannot win. They are no match for America or for the rest of the world. So they use very, very, that tactics you never would have imagined. And this is what you have to do. You have to get rid of them quick and fast. If you don't do that, they have 90 million brains thinking of how to fight.
Okay, you're talking about the Chinese Communist Party
Yes.
here. Okay, I see.
And
Yes,
we
yeah.
have how many? Maybe 1,000 people thinking how to fight the Chinese. There's no match. That's why it's a very serious matter. Here, they are not taking them serious enough. That's the problem. There's no urgency. Everybody's more worried about the Dow Jones, NASDAQ, and so on. Safety comes first. And already, I don't know how many trillions of dollars been lost. And what is the stock market? Not that much compared to the trillions of dollars lost. I feel that it's really not coordinated. And because of the election and lots of bipartisan bickering and so on, people should stay focused. It's really a present danger from China, very serious, and you should be preparing for it.
So you're advocating for more bipartisanship on the China issue. It sounds like.
They have to They are cooperating in many instances. For instance, the resolution law passed today, I'm sure they will get bipartisan support.
The Autonomy Act was
Yes.
unanimous in the Senate. We'll see how it does in the House.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think even the House will pass, will unanimous. But this is not big measures, right? What I'm proposing is, for instance, sanctioning the entire Communist Party membership. Not picking 100 at a time. You punish 100, they can replenish. They have 90 million, and they have new blood joining every day. So this is piecemeal. You have to have a final solution. Without, you have to have a deep. You have to take care of the CCP once and for all. That's what I'm saying. And you cannot have a piecemeal. This is an enemy. You have no idea how powerful they are. Not in the sense of the Western world, but here. That is the trouble. You know, in the I'm sure you heard about the book, The Art of War. Mm-hmm. The Art of War said you should never be tired of deception when you are fighting. You should never be tired, because people say, "Oh, I don't like deception because this is only for the bad people." But in a war, this is what Sun Tzu said: you should never be tired of deception. And when you have 90 million Communist Party members fighting to gain position, they are all thinking. They are all thinking how to win and how to rule the world. It's in their declaration.
Well, and it's interesting, earlier you were talking about, the power that I think it was Xi Jinping has amassed, but you also have kind of an insight into how this Communist Party structure works and these different families. Maybe if you could give us a little bit of insight. This could be a whole interview in itself.
No.
Right?
Yeah. First of all, don't let them fool you. There is no nation. There is no nation. That's a facade. Nation, government, all these are facade. What is a nation, right? You have to have a constitution. Their constitution means nothing, all right? You have to have a government. All their government official, behind the government official, there's always a party secretary controlling that, even the prime minister. Xi Jinping controls Li Keqiang, right? That's even in a restaurant, a manager is controlled by a party secretary in the back. You think you are negotiating with the manager of a factory? No, he has to report to a party. There's somebody watching. So there is no nation. It's not one nation, two system. It's one party, two system, or one gang, two system. So the whole China, the great land of China, is dominated by one party or one gang. Let's put it that way. One criminal party. And under them, 90 million are gangsters. That's what they are. Controlling 1.4 billion slaves. That is the system. No, in history, you see that. In Egypt or in ancient China, that's the same. It's only, maybe after the Second World War, you have nation state, then everything changed. People become the master. So what they are practicing is the old system, which we have practiced, the Chinese have practiced for thousands of years.
But I'm sure many Chinese, especially, we have all these, you said almost 400,000 students, Chinese students in America. Well, a lot of these folks aren't going to say, hey, they don't think they're slaves.
They don't learn they don't learn law. They don't learn your political science. They don't learn any of the stuff. They only learn your engineering. And then they go back and use that engineering, go back and build their industry. They don't learn any of your constitution, the freedom, how Americans works. They don't care. They believe they have a better system. And they rather be slaves. It's like, they are higher slave, people with more power, and lower slave. That's the system it works. It's a hierarchy. It's basically a hierarchy. So the more you go to China, you understand everything is party. So that's why when U.S. is negotiating with China, they thought, oh, this guy Liu He and something, everything goes back to Xi. That's why he can suddenly change. Oh, I don't want this, all right, and then suddenly come back and say, I'll sign it anyway.
Well, it's interesting, but you're also saying that he's accountable, it seems like, to somebody. Is it the party members? Who is it that makes him decide what he has to do?
About 4 years ago, he was still accountable to the Politburo. But then he changed the constitution. Normally he is only good for 2 terms, which is 5 years times 2. He said, I'm no longer restricted by these 2 terms. Look at Mr. Putin. He's still kind of, Russia is kind of a semi-totalitarian. So that's the way it is. It's a very simple structure, very simple structure.
So if Xi Jinping were replaced, would it be different somehow?
No difference. You have to become, China is too big. It has to become federated like United States, federations, all right, and have different, and the people have to have to say. They have to, and it takes 2 or 3 generations to be able to have some kind of democracy, like Taiwan. Chinese are capable of democracy. There's no problem, but you have to give them time, 2 or 3 generations. Look at Taiwan. Singapore is almost not as good as Taiwan. And we Hong Kong people, we deserve to have democracy. We are very well educated. we read the same books as you do. So now, only because we were not willing to pay the price, now the kids say, we are willing to pay the price and become a real nation.
Any final words before we finish up?
I think U.S. is under severe threat. The Chinese have not given up. You look at this meeting in Hawaii. After the meeting, they just carry on with the National Security Act. Means they have some cards that we don't know what cards they have for them to go on. We know, I mean, power-wise, U.S. is so much more superior. But for them to carry on to do what they do in Hong Kong means they do have some hidden cards. We need to do something very urgently, not just by punish. The U.S. like to use this measure response. That is not good enough. Measure response means let the Chinese do something and then we hit them back. But you never know what the next blow is. You may not survive. So you have to take an active role, saying we have to do this. For instance, we turn off all your US dollar in and out. For instance, drastic and immediate, and has to finish in a matter of months, not years. And if you keep on talking about this measure response, sorry, I'm not against anybody, but you're going to end up losing, seriously. And we are relying on US for our safety. So I'm not criticizing them, but we want to see US win.
Elmer Yuen, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.